Good afternoon. So thank you for coming along on this busy afternoon at BET. So I know what a busy time it is, so thank you for making the time. As you can see, I'm going to talk a little bit about doing business in Southeast Asia, specifically targeting the decision makers and how to operate effectively within the region. One of the things I thought would be helpful to do is define what we mean by Southeast Asia. One of the most frequently asked questions is, does it include kind of China? Does it include India? And I think the answer, according to Wikipedia anyway, is definitely not. This is pretty much the definition of Southeast Asia. And you can see the countries, see the region, see the vast kind of geographical spread that we have. One of the reasons why people want to do business in Southeast Asia is pretty much captured in this number here. Against the kind of global economic kind of situation, this region has been spectacular in its year-on-year growth over the last few years. So that figure of 6.8% would be 3 or 4 times the figure that many of the Western economies could even dream about in normal times, then mind you, in a period of financial crisis. So it really does drive a huge economic growth. It drives the emergence of a middle class as well, which for those of us involved in exporting educational products and services is really a crucial indicator of a good place to do business. And just to support that, a couple of quotes from people over the last kind of couple of years. So looking at JP Morgan, they picked out particularly that that rapid growth that I just talked about does create a superb opportunity. You've got complex and diverse markets, which again, that complexity, although it adds difficulty to doing business, also makes it an attractive place. Once you do get established, once you do understand how to do business there, it makes it harder for people to compete. The other quote from Reuters really pulls out that factor about the middle class, that as you see this, in effect, commodity-driven growth, the link to the Chinese economy, you see a long-term sustainable economic growth path that is pushing a very strong and very diverse middle class in the region. So I'm going to talk just a little bit to explain what it is that we do, because that will help to give some background to the conversation I'm going to have after that about kind of some factors and experiences that we've learned from doing business in the region. Rather than talk at you, I'm going to play this video, which takes about 2 minutes, which will give you what you need to know for the rest of the conversation. So hopefully that not very Asian landscape gives you a sense of the kind of work that we do. So it's obviously driven by software and services, infrastructure and scanning provision, lots of computer power needed to match and process data. So as you will have guessed, because we work primarily with ministries of education and national awarding bodies, to protect kind of commercial relationships, I'm not going to talk specifically about individual projects. I'm going to give a bit of an overview about the work that we do in the region and some of the things that we've learned from doing that. One of the key lessons that we've learned is before you engage in a project, especially the kind of high-stakes work that we do, it's important to get an overview of the place that you're going to. So whether it's the city, the state, the country, understand some of the big picture about the politics, the economy, the cultural factors, religious factors, things that are important to the place that you're going to do business, especially because you work in the educational space, that pretty much anyone that's worked in a school knows that the whole of life is in there, so you need to be able to understand what's happening in a place to be able to really engage effectively. And there is an awful lot of data which will help you to understand what problem it is that you're trying to fix. So depending on the kind of things that you're trying to sell, you might want to look at different factors. So a region with a high population might be important if you're selling commodities and you want to have high volume, low cost type products and services. Equally, a more affluent economy such as Singapore might be a more attractive market if you're selling high-end, very focused types of products and services. So there's a lot of information that you can pull out from the public domain, and clearly UKTI can help, that gives you a starting point to understand a country, understand a place, and really get started. But then it's important to focus down on what's the real problem. So what is it that you've got that can actually address a real problem for that country, for that economy? So one of the things we do quite a bit is look at the PISA scores. Obviously a moderately controversial kind of reference point, but they are helpful, especially at the kind of trend level, to work out what it is that you want to do. So one of the key drivers in the region is competitiveness between countries in the region. So if you're looking at kind of math, science and English, you look at a country like Singapore, so that the green arrow indicates that they've improved since the last PISA results, so high scores already, continuing to improve. Anything you're going to sell to Singapore has to be part of the process of continuing to make a system that's already working even better. Whereas if you've got perhaps another country like Vietnam, which is doing well, but perhaps doesn't have that same momentum behind it in terms of improvement, and then a country like Malaysia, which has specific ups and downs, so science going pretty well, English perhaps not so well. So if you're going to look at, well, what proposition have we got? How does that fit with that particular country? And how does it fit with the competitors in the region? So are you bringing something that will give commercial and economic advantage to that country, or is it a like for like? It's an important thing to understand what it is, the real problem that you're trying to get to. Another thing is almost like a personal observation, really, is that it's important, if you're selling into the educational space, to get out and see the real world. Colleague who spoke before mentioned the importance of going out to see school visits. And you know, it's easy when you're in a faraway place from the UK to spend time with colleagues in the hotel, to use any free time to go to the tourist sites, and actually not to engage with what's happening in the schools, in the economy, in the local community. And I think it is important to try and get out to visit schools, to understand, talk to teachers, talk to parents, to get the heartbeat of the educational system and understand how your products and services really do work. I think one thing that's come across from those of you that saw the earlier presentations is the need for a partner. It is very hard to turn up and do business by yourself in Southeast Asia. Some of these bigger companies, especially the software companies, will have offices pretty much throughout the region. So Microsoft have 9 offices, HP have 6, I think Accenture have 9 offices, pretty much in each of the commercial centres. You will find people in a similar business who are already in the region, understand the politics, connected to the local business community. So there might not necessarily be the right partners for you in terms of actually doing business, executing business, but there probably are the right people to network with in the way that you would in the UK, find out what's what, understand the local politics, and perhaps be good introducers to the local agents and the middle companies that you might need to be able to do business in the region. one of the things I think it's worth reflecting upon is, well, why do countries in the region want to talk to UK-based companies? And I think from kind of experience, these are the 6 key factors that I think we do draw upon. I think it's important not to underestimate the value of the Education UK brand. I think if you look at the work that goes on in terms of the awarding bodies, the support that comes for emerging economies, educational systems from UK-based companies, the fact that we have a strong public and private school network, that we have a strong consultancy network. Lots of people are aware of the good and the bad things that happen in UK education. We also are amazingly transparent in what we do, so the publication of league tables, the availability of Ofsted reports, the wide availability of PISA scores. We tell people a lot about how our system works. That enables people to look at the good and the bad and draw that out and learn lessons from that. I think the university sector is key. So again, colleague mentioned earlier that University of Newcastle setting up a campus near Kuala Lumpur. Many UK universities have either got campuses in the region or proactively attracting students from the region back to the UK. That generates a lot of good publicity, a lot of networking, a lot of awareness of UK education that you can build upon. I think companies that are used to doing business within Europe are very familiar with stringent procurement rules. So looking at Singapore, for example, which has a very high rating in terms of ease of doing business, part of that is based upon a very transparent, very fair procurement system, but it's also very rigid. It also requires lots of rigor in terms of compliance, in terms of commercial agreements. So companies that are used to doing business under the OJU rules, used to doing procurements within the European framework, generally understand that way of doing business. I think a proven track record is crucial. So if you are trying to convince a country to do business with you, you're operating 7,000 to 8,000 miles from your home base, you need to be able to demonstrate the ability to actually deliver against that. So that can be working just in Europe, it can be working in other parts of the world, but you do need to have that track record that proves that you're able to operate effectively through partners, through agents, in different languages, adapting to different, even kind of seasons, times of the year. So our business currently, during the summer period in the UK, we'll process maybe 80, 90 million exam scripts. That would be a different season if you go to the Southern Hemisphere and go to Southeast Asia. The examination system happens at a different time. You need to be able to prove that you've got that capacity to work in the kind of rhythm of that country, not just take UK methods and try and force your customer to adapt to them. I think cultural alignment is crucial. So our kind of tag, our branding is every result matters. We're very focused upon getting things right, accuracy, reliability, security. Whatever is your reason for doing business, that needs to be culturally aligned. So generally, going there just to make money is not the right answer. You're looking for that cultural alignment, the commitment to education, the commitment to economic growth, commitment to young people, commitment to economic development. Whatever it is that works for you, that needs to be clear, needs to be transparent, it needs to be well explained, because it's a very competitive market and you need to have a value-based reason for doing business as well as an economic reason. And the other thing I never underestimate is the fact that English-speaking countries do have an advantage in exporting their business. Generally, English is a universal language for business. It's a good starting point. It's clearly important to communicate effectively in the local language. But having a starting point of English is an advantage, and it's something that we do find when we compete with companies from Europe who potentially are Dutch or German. They seem to have a less of an advantage than we do in that initial engagement and getting started in the conversation. A couple of people earlier have talked about culture. And clearly, it is important to be sensitive to the culture of the region and to the way of doing business, the way of people interacting with each other. But one thing I would say, it's important not to underestimate how similar the culture might be. So it's slightly out of the region, but just an anecdote. I was in the University of Mumbai earlier part of this year, and we were waiting to go into the meeting, and it was in the boardroom, and all along the wall there was pictures of the previous vice-chancellors, and for the first maybe 100 kind of 150 years, they were pretty much white Victorian gentlemen who'd gone there to be the Vice-Chancellor. And it was easy to think, well, this is a living evidence, in effect, of the colonial past, and feeling a bit kind of guilty about all the baggage that goes with that. But actually, if you talk to the current Vice-Chancellor and then do a little bit of research about this guy here, who is the very first Vice-Chancellor, Professor Wilson, the reason he founded the University of Mumbai, the commitment he had to education as a way of economic development, education as a means of improving young people's life chances, commitment to the culture and the values of learning, remarkably similar to the current culture as well. So I think it's important to pull out the good bits of cultural alignment, not just the differences. And the photograph on the right is a dinner had with a partner company we were working for. And the conversation around that dinner table was remarkably similar to conversations I've had in other parts of the world. It was about how to add value to our customer relationships, how to do the right thing in terms of providing support to educational institutions, how to help young people learn, help teachers to teach. Very, very similar. It might have been in a different language and the food might have been different, but the culture and the values were remarkably consistent with what we might find in the UK and other parts of the world. So just some kind of takeaways to summarise from what we've learned. So in the region generally, the money that's going into educational investment, educational development, is for long-term purposes. It's about driving, as you've seen in Malaysia, kind of long-term plans, 10, 15, 20-year plans, long-term economic growth, developing the economy, developing the GDP. It's all about long-term investment. Generally, because the stakes are so high, people aren't looking to take risks. So there is a culture of innovation, but not very risky innovation in our experience. So it's important to have a proven track record, to have products that work, services that work, so that risk is understandable and manageable. So the risk might be about how do we make this work in our region, not necessarily how do we make this work full stop. So although many of these economies are highly innovative in other areas, generally in educational projects, they're quite risk averse. A key driver is competing with their regional neighbours. So people are competing with each other to get inward investment, to get GDP growth, to get the export-based economy that makes those economies so successful. So when you're looking at bringing a proposition to these countries, it's important to understand how this will play in the region. Is it, as we've looked at the PISA numbers before, is it a catch-up? Is it an accelerator? Is it something that just enables someone to be more competitive, or perhaps to undermine an advantage their neighbour has? But I think looking closely at the region is important. It's very investment focused, so people are prepared to spend money to get the right thing for the long term. It tends not to be, as we sometimes find in UK-based projects, where it's revenue-based, so people looking to spend a grant, some money that's become available on a short-term project. It tends to be money that's been embedded into an economic plan that's linked to high-level political objectives and is designed to deliver a long-term outcome. So you should be looking, I think, when you build your propositions about return on investment, even if that takes a long-term view. I think looking at that, whatever you're asking people to do as an investment rather than just a revenue spend, is an important differential. I mentioned before, this isn't universal, but it is common enough to be worth considering. Procurement tends to be quite rigid, so there tends not to be the opportunity for reshaping of propositions, off-the-record conversations, changing of requirements. Once a procurement's started, pretty much it's about answering the requirements that have been identified, being compliant with the legal and commercial framework, and being able to prove what you say. So I think understanding that once procurement starts, the game's on, you have to deliver against that, is an important principle. In our experience, customers in Southeast Asia are pace hungry. That once they've made the commitment to start, once they want to go ahead of this investment, they want to move quickly. So it's an intricate balance between all the things I talked about in terms of long-term goals and investment focus, but once they've made the decision, they want to get started. They don't want to wait 2 or 3 years to do it. So if you are bidding for work, if you're making a kind of pitch to these countries, you need to be ready to go fairly quickly. It can take a long time to get the project agreed, but once it is agreed, generally it's off and moving quickly. We find that ministries of education, teachers, education professionals are willing to listen and learn to experiences that we've gained in the UK. That doesn't mean they think we have the universal answers and we have the panacea to all problems, but they are keen to understand what works well, what doesn't, why things work differently, what lessons we've learned, how we might adapt and change. So I think be prepared to share what you've learned, be prepared to be open about what you bring. And we found particularly being open about mistakes, being open about projects that haven't gone as fast or have had problems, although it feels like a dangerous thing to do, is actually the right thing to do, because you're sharing knowledge and expertise that enables the next project to be more successful. In our experience, people are very demanding of suppliers. Once they've made the choice that you are the right partner for them, there's a lot of expectation of you standing up to the commitments that you've made. So whether that's about putting people in the region, about having the right expertise available at the right time, working flexibly across time zones, sharing information, sharing software. Demanding is a good word, really. It is hard work. And the final thing I'd say is that kind of myth of the kind of work ethic in the Southeast Asia, of the speed and appetite people have for work, in our experience, is not a myth at all. We find, working across different time zones, we'll be getting requests for conference calls, midnight our time, 6 a.m. our time. People have a big appetite for working, making the best of the time they have available, and really driving suppliers hard. So if you're going to do business in the region, be prepared to work hard. I think just to finish, there is an awful lot of help available to do that research, to understand the culture, to get networked into an area, to get to know the different countries. So there's UKTI, FCO. LinkedIn has an amazing number of groups looking at the region. You can network quite easily with professionals in the region. We find as well that publications and events, Westminster Education Forum, Education Investor, have been good for contacts, good for giving us information about the region and getting us started on some long-term projects.